like American holiday food, especially turkey and dressing. That's one of my favorites. Problem is, American Thanksgiving isn't a thing in France. In fact, you can't even find a whole turkey until about December 1st. And then it's just turkey's kind of a substitute for people that can't afford a goose. Don't get me wrong, goose is pretty darn good, but it's not a turkey. When I can find a turkey, here's one dish I really like to make. It's kind of like American Thanksgiving with a very French twist. So in part 2, you'll see the entire turkey ballotine. But here we are in part 1. I'm going to use my leftover dressings, the cornbread dressing and the spinach dressing that I used in part 2 to assemble the full ballotine. I'm going to use the balance of those along with some duck fingers to make a nice meal that I can enjoy today. Because sadly the turkey ballotine, which you'll see in part 2, takes at least 2 days to make. Yeah, it's a lot of work, but I think it's really worth it. And I hope you'll enjoy this. It's important to make the cornbread at least a day before you try to make the dressing or stuffing or whatever you make. So I've got my type 55 bread flour in, and then a little more than that volume of cornmeal, baking powder, which here is levure chimique, 2 pinches of salt. Let's give that a stir. Buttermilk is really the best thing, but I don't have any. So I'm using creme fraiche, which means I may have to add a little milk or water to it. When I say may, I think I mean definitely. If you don't have creme fraiche and you want to follow exactly along, sour cream is a good substitute. Almost never drop an eggshell in, but of course I do when I'm on camera. All right, I need some butter. And this butter is just melted. Just give that a slow stir. Oh, you know what I forgot was sugar. Should have put that in with the dry. But again, this isn't cornbread for serving a wedge of cornbread with chili. This is cornbread for making dressing. So I'm actually going to add some whole cream and grease my pan. And a little water since I used nothing but heavy wet ingredients. Alright, that's pretty good. And it's just good form to scrape down your bowl and give it another mix. Still seems a little thick. Now if I was making cornbread to eat as cornbread, I'd probably put some whole corn and some jalapenos in it and all those other yummy things. And you notice I didn't really measure anything. You can Google a cornbread recipe, or you have one, and make it the way you like. I did pretty well here. I filled my pan about halfway, because of course it'll rise. And now we'll go in the oven. Pretty good dressing. Let it cool, let it get stale overnight. So, hey, another thing that I need to do a day ahead of time is cook the spinach. And that's because I want to make sure it's able to drain pretty well overnight. And I haven't really decided yet if I'm making just a layer of spinach or if I'm going to make spinach dressing. Usually with this dish I make the layer of spinach. I'm just going to put a little bit of water in the bottom of this pan, and you may have noticed that there's a basket in the pan. It's just going to make it easier for me to drain things later. And it takes about 3 times as much spinach as you think you're going to need. You see, I'm getting ready to make stock because we are going to be boning a turkey. maybe some other stuff as well. So that's cooking. We'll just watch it, and it won't take long to cook it as soon as that water comes up to temperature, which I can push the impatient bastard mode, and we'll be set. We'll let that cook. It won't take long. I just want to wilt the spinach real well. Then I'll pull it off the water, press it, and set it up to drain overnight. And it's relatively cool here, so I don't even need to worry about refrigerating it. Although if it's not cool where you live, refrigerating it's always a good idea. The safest practice is the best practice. Check you in a bit. Spinach from yesterday. Even though I press it, look how much drained out overnight. It's still really wet, so we're going to have to squeeze it out. So I'll take a cleanish towel. I mean, it's been laundered, it's just stained because I use these things. Now the idea is the spinach is going to end up next to the yams in the ballotine. So we're definitely going to need to season it, especially if I'm leaving the yams relatively whole. Salt and pepper for sure. Some red peppers would be pretty, but I really want a nice fine julienne of the peppers. Got to be really smart about this. And of course, onion, maybe shallots. Shallots would be probably the tastiest thing in there. Mushrooms would be, okay, we're starting to find some vegetables. Some tired celery. Those are nice looking mushrooms. Champignon de Paris, of course. A few shallots. Well, I definitely love the idea of sliced mushrooms in here, especially since I have such pretty mushrooms to work with. And I'm actually going to kind of carefully slice those whole and saute them in butter. Usually when I slice a mushroom, I get down to that end where it gets a little dangerous. I'll just turn it over and slice it into smaller pieces. That really would mess up my look for this one, so I guess I'm just going to have to be careful. And I have to cook these ahead of time because otherwise they're going to release all that moisture inside the ballotine. And again, it won't slice nicely and won't hold on the plate. So I'll go ahead and drop the mushrooms in the butter because it's hot, medium-high heat, and I'm going to kind of cook them gently. So I only did these yams for 5 minutes in the pressure cooker, and look how soft they are. I'm not even sure I can shock those, but I have to do it gently. So I filled my cooker with cold water. Drop this gently in. Well, at least I know that stuff will be tender. Need a little more water. And that is almost all I need. I want these lightly sauteed. Got a few that are more cooked than the others, of course. I have just the right amount of butter in there where I can see it, and it's clarified butter. So I'm trying to boil off the water that's coming out of the mushrooms. So again, medium-high heat really is your friend here. Okay, I'm pretty happy with these mushrooms. I really want a fine julienne here. And I definitely don't want any of that bitter part. Normally I wouldn't worry about this little bit of white stuff, but I think it really is going to matter. And I tried to be pretty wasteful actually, the way I trimmed that pepper. I don't know if you noticed or not. Normally I dig a little deeper. This part's really bitter. And yes, these will release some moisture. I don't want them overcooked because they tend to start losing color when you do that. Now the rest of this, I want little cubes. Of course, I'm not going to waste the ends, but I want these nice little cubes. And I'm going to put that in our dressing.
It's history. And I think some people adapt and learn and respect it. Some people don't.
I'm spicy celery on a bias because I like that. I like the shape that gives me. Not so much with these little tiny pieces from the top of the plant. But like that's a relatively ugly celery. But that's a pretty shape. And I really only want the green part. So this white part, I'm going to throw in my stock pot. So this is kind of a traditional dressing. Sometimes called cornbread dressing, sometimes it's called celery dressing. I have no idea what it's called in France or if it even exists. Probably not. French don't eat a whole lot of corn, although they grow a lot. Good for animals and it's good for ethanol. And we don't have a lot of fossil fuels here. Coal to the north in the northeast, but most of the fossil fuels come from Russia, and ironically propane actually comes from the US, and it costs less here than it does in the US, even in Texas, so go figure. Maybe some leeks. Let's make this a little more Franglish. Even though I've already washed these, sometimes there's a lot of sand caught up in here, but these are they're pretty good. Here we have
Western people approach it as a
pretty vegetables for a dressing. And I'll be honest, I rarely even bother cutting this because I don't really care if it crumbles or not, especially the way I'm going to end up mixing this. It's going to be pretty crumbly. You want some texture left in the dressing. Alright, this is a good place for me to pause. Stuffing. So here we have our spinach dressing. Definitely going to need some seasoning. Bunch of black pepper. Fleur de sel. Granulated garlic, a little rosemary, a little thyme, actually kind of a lot of thyme. See if I can get away with one egg. No, I don't think I can get away with one egg. The spinach is still going to have a lot of moisture in it. So my only hope of this holding together is to not be shot with the eggs.
She's the mother god of the earth.
Breadcrumbs.
As a sanctuary. She is a sanctuary.
And we have accomplished what we can with the spatula. There's our spinach layer. Give the hands a rinse and move on. Now, a lot of people make this really soup. I don't. If I was baking this in a casserole dish, sure, I could make it soupy. And I could use real chicken stock. And this is real chicken stock. It's just been cooked down a whole bunch. It's a nice, really high quality product. Again, with thyme, sage. This is crushed sage, but I need to find rub sage, which is really a tricky thing here in France. And kind of a lot of that. Bunch of eggs. And some water.
Today's adventurers are driven by the lust to reach somewhere no one has reached before, and to do something no one has done before.
Squeezing it like it's clay. And I actually want it where it's going to hold some texture. I want to make sure I work that egg in all the way around. Boy, it just smells amazing. And of course, it's a whole lot more than we need. Okay, I'm going to set these aside and give myself a rinse. Yeah, so I just had an idea for all these leftover bits. Honestly, this has been all day in the kitchen for something I'm not going to be able to eat today.
The waves of stone.
Need a little something more, keep it from being too repetitive. I had bought these aigrettes de canard in case I didn't feel like I had enough force meat. I was going to sneak a little duck meat into the grinder. But I ended up having a perfect amount of force meat. Never put sage on the duck. I don't know that I need to since I've got so much sage in the cornbread. Sea salt, a lot of black pepper. That can go in the oven. That made for a pretty good meal and a pretty good stopping place for today's video. Be sure to come back for part 2 where we assemble the magnificent beast that is the turkey Ballotine. I hope to see you there.